It is an allegation that Scientology has been fighting for years. The controversial church has strenuously denied that it forces its members to, quote unquote, disconnect from anybody who leaves the faith, to cut all ties, even with loved ones. But tonight you're going to meet a mother and a longtime Scientologist who says the church forced her into a choice between her son and her daughter. It's part of our series, Faith Matters.
This is the image most Americans have of Scientology. High-gloss videos featuring big-time stars like Tom Cruise, John Travolta, and Kirstie Alley, who have all publicly lauded the faith, saying it's helped them in their lives.
I think it's a privilege to call yourself a Scientologist. We are the authorities on getting people off drugs. We are the authorities on the mind.
This woman may have a less recognizable face, but she was a longtime member who's now coming forward with a very different story about Scientology.
I'm speaking out now because I don't want this to happen to other people. I don't want this to happen to other families.
Sarah Goldberg blames the church for breaking apart her family, effectively, she says, forcing her to choose between her son and her daughter.
And no mother should ever have to make that choice. They were giving me a Sophie's choice, and it's not right.
Goldberg says she spent 36 years in the church, which was founded by science fiction writer L. Ron Hubbard, and that she and her husband both reached the top level of spiritual progression known as Operating Thetan 8.
I was sort of the poster child for a Scientologist.
But the problems began, she says, when her son, Nick, who was raised in the church, developed doubts about the faith.
You grow up in it, so that's all you know, and you believe whatever your parents tell you to believe, right? Then when you reach adulthood, I mean, there's things I didn't like, the way they recruited, the theories they told you about life and the universe.
On the surface, he was an engaged Scientologist, actively recruiting people to the faith, but underneath, he says, he was in turmoil.
I was really good at getting people to listen and just sell them books and all that, and I didn't want to. I just did it because I had to. Kind of feel bad I did that.
Nick started associating with vocal critics of the church, including Marty Rathbun and Mike Rinder, former high-ranking officials who quit and went public, making allegations on Nightline and elsewhere that the head of the church, David Miscavige, had physically struck subordinates.
Miscavige just takes off across the room in front of 80 people and delivered just a beating to the guy. I mean, beat him up bad.
The church has repeatedly and strenuously denied those allegations while condemning both Rathbun and Rinder as liars and apostates. Nick was cast out of the church, declared a quote-unquote suppressive person.
It was devastating. I mean, I felt the pain he felt. It was like hell.
After Nick was labeled suppressive, his mother says church officials repeatedly pressured her and her husband, also a Scientologist, to, quote, disconnect from her son, to cut ties completely. She feared that refusing meant she too would be labeled suppressive and would likely lose her relationship with her daughter, Ashley, still a devout Scientologist. So she briefly did disconnect from Nick until he got drunk, got a gun, and threatened to kill himself.
I didn't really have many reasons to stick around at the time, so, I mean, that's the simplicity of it.
I get this text from my son saying, don't come home, you know? I have a gun and I have a bottle of booze, and the heart just drops and falls out of your chest.
Goldberg's story directly contradicts the church's long-standing position that it does not force anyone into disconnecting, that the choice to cut ties is voluntary. In a statement, the church tells ABC News, any accusations or inferences that the church interfered in the private affairs of this family are untrue. The record shows the church acted with compassion, responding to requests for assistance from this family, including requests to help their son deal with a drug and alcohol addiction.
The church is lying when they say there is no disconnection practiced and enforced. It's not true. I have proof.
In fact, Goldberg gave us this document, one she first shared with the Tampa Bay Times, which broke this story, in which a church official says he cannot approve of her continued relationship with her son, explicitly using the word disconnection. Ultimately, she says, she and her husband chose to stand by Nick. The result, she says, they were both called in front of what the church calls a committee of evidence and ultimately declared suppressive. At which point, her daughter, Ashley, chose to cut ties in what her mom describes as a wrenching scene.
We talked and we cried, and she said, Mom, I have to disconnect from you. And it was just very sad. I know my daughter loves me, and she loves her brother, and that was the last time I saw my daughter or my granddaughter.
Goldberg says she still believes in the teachings of Scientology, but now shares her son's doubts about how the church is being run, especially after she finally went online, something she says church members are discouraged from doing, and saw what critics were saying about Scientology. Specifically, she saw this interview that Nightline did with Debbie Cook, a former Scientology official who testified in court that David Miscavige ordered his secretary to slap her.
And she did it.
And she did it very hard, yes.
Hard enough that you fell down?
Yes.
Why did he ask her to do this?
Because he was displeased about how I was answering a question. It wasn't what he wanted to hear in some way.
Scientology has denied this charge and, as it has done with other critics, labeled Debbie Cook a bitter apostate and liar. But Goldberg says she was deeply troubled by Cook's testimony.
And I started to understand why the church doesn't want its parishioners to go on the internet and read stuff, because there's too many things that they would learn.
It has now been 9 months since she's had any contact with her daughter, her son-in-law, and her granddaughter.
It's just cruel because I can't even email my daughter. I sent a package of presents to my granddaughter for Christmas and it was refused and sent back.
Oh, here's Mojo.
All that she has left is pictures and memories and hope.
I want my family back, and I have wonderful memories. The evil practice of disconnection, it destroys families. It's got to stop. It's got to end.
The latest installment in our series, Faith Matters.